Hi guys, this is module 57 and today we are adding and subtracting rational expressions. So remember, a rational expression is just like a fraction. So this is like 1/2 plus 1/3. And remember that today we're going to have to use the least common denominator, right, or the LCD. So if we were going to add these fractions, we'd have to basically multiply each of them times each other. In order to figure out what is the least common denominator, which would be 6, before we could add them, right? So we'd have 3 plus 2, and we get 5, 6, right? So we're going to follow the exact same pattern, but this time we're going to have variables in it. So that's why they're called rational expressions. So our first step, just like normal, is going to be to factor the numerator and the denominator, so the top and the bottom of the fraction, just like we have been the whole time. We're going to try and figure out what the LCD is, so we're going to figure out what's missing from each piece. We're going to rewrite each fraction as an equivalent fraction with the LCD, so that's exactly what we did here in this step where we had both the 6's on the bottom there. We're going to add or subtract the numerators, right? So whichever one it tells us to do. And then we're going to simplify or factor the new numerator. Right, so we're going to check to see if there's anything that we can cancel. And then finally, we're going to cross out the common factors that divide to 1. So we're going to basically simplify as much as possible. So, sounds kind of complicated. There are 6 steps, but as we go through, we'll see how each one works. So, first step, we're going to factor the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to look at my numerator here. I see that it's 2 terms, but it's not subtraction, so I don't see anything in common, so I'm just going to rewrite it, x squared plus 4. And then the denominator, I also see 2 terms. I don't see anything in common, so I'm going to leave it at the bottom, 2x squared plus 9. I look at the top, I have x squared plus 5, nothing common there, and 2x squared plus 9. So it doesn't look like anything can be factored from the numerators or the denominators, so we're moving on. We're going to look and see if we can find the least common denominator. Well, the denominators are actually already the same. So I know that I can add these fractions. So I'm going to have 2x squared plus 9. Notice my denominator does not change, right? It doesn't change, just like we didn't change the 6's, right? Just like these 6's didn't turn into a 12 here, right? Our denominator does not change. However, we are going to add or subtract the numerators. So here in this instance, we are adding. So I'm going to have x squared plus x squared here. That's going to give me 2x squareds. And then I'm also going to look at my 4 plus my 5. That's going to give me plus 9 here. Wow. So that means I'm going to try and simplify or factor the numerator. I don't see anything in common, so I'm going to leave it as it is. And then my last step here is to cross out the common factors in the numerator and the denominator that divide to 1. So I can see here that I actually have the same thing on top and on bottom. And I know that anything divided by itself is just the number 1. So the number 1 is going to be my answer for this problem. I still want to have the things that x is not allowed to be equal to, right? So I'm going to take my 2x squared plus 9. It's not allowed to be equal to 0, right? The bottom of the fraction can't equal 0. So I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides. I get 2x squared cannot equal negative 9. Divide by 2, and I get x squared is not allowed to be negative 9 over 2. I'm going to square root both sides. Kind of complicated, but I'm going to say x is not allowed to be equal to negative 9 over 2. All right, we will work on that part. Right now, I just want you to focus on getting to your answer here. So that was our first problem. Let's try a subtraction problem and one where we see a little bit more of the factoring, right? So in our example here, I'm going to go ahead and erase all of this guy so we can remember our steps. Right. So our first step is to factor the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to start with my numerator. I don't think there's anything in common between there, so I'm going to leave that one up there. Here I see a trinomial, so I'm going to go ahead and use the x factor. And I have negative 16 on top and positive 6 on bottom. Want things that multiply to get negative 16 and add to get 6. I'm thinking about 8 and 2. I know one of them has to be negative, and I want positive 6. So I'm going to do 8 minus 2. That means I'm going to have x plus 8 and x minus 2 as my denominator, right? And then over here, I have 2. Nothing common about that. And then I have x minus 2. So that is going to be my factor step. My second step is to determine the least common denominator. So over here, when I had 2 and 3, I multiplied them together, right? I saw what was missing from each part. In this case, I'm going to see that I have an x minus 2 and an x minus 2 in both situations, right? My first fraction, however, has an x plus 8 here, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take x plus 8 and I'm going to multiply it on this one as well so that my denominators are the same. So I can see the x plus 8 and the x plus 8 along with the x minus 2 that they already had, right? Because I'm multiplying the bottom of my second fraction by x plus 8, I also need to do that to the top, right? Because that's like multiplying times 1. Right, so that means that I now have a common denominator. That was step 2. I'm going to rewrite each fraction, right? That's already what I had here. That's when I was multiplying by x plus 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distribute these pieces in here. So I'm going to have 3x plus 26 minus this whole thing that's happening over here. So 2 times x, which is 2x, and 2 times 8, which is plus 16, right? That means that I'm going to have 3x plus 26 minus 2x, and then I'm going to distribute that negative on there, so I have minus 16, right? I'm going to remember that that's over my least common denominator. I'm just going to write LCD so I don't have to keep writing this whole thing out here, right? From here, I'm going to simplify the top of that numerator, right? So here we are simplifying the numerator. I have 3x minus 2x. It's going to give me x. I have 26 minus 16. That's going to give me plus 10. And it's over my LCD, which at this point I'm just going to go ahead and write out is that x plus 8 times x minus 2. I don't see anything in common, so step 6, crossing out things that are in common. I don't see anything that's in common, so I'm going to have my fraction here. I'm going to look at my denominator. I know that x is not allowed to be negative 8, and it's not allowed to be positive 2. Okay? And that is how I add and subtract. There are more examples on my next video.